Quantum radar, that is, using quantum properties of electromagnetic radiation to improve the radar performance, particularly against low observable aircraft or ships. DARPA, that is the United States Advanced Research Agency, in 2020 said that, and I quote, "It is not yet a practical near-term solution for long-range detection." Then, in 2021, the Chinese claimed a detection at 100 kilometers range. And this is catnip for internet trolls. Anyway, I had serious problems with this because I did not study quantum mechanics, but when I started looking into the subject, I realized that the concept is not difficult to understand, but there is a huge potential to make stealth irrelevant once and for all.
Sir, we can't do this.
Why?
Because you made a video full of errors 7 years ago on the same subject.
Shush, don't tell anyone. Hi, I'm Gas. Welcome to Millennium 7. So, first thing to avoid any confusion, quantum radar and photonic radar, also known as ROFAR, are different technologies, they're not related. Here we are discussing just the quantum radar. So, quantum entanglement. You may have heard the term. I am surely not the best person to explain it, but for the scope of this video, quantum entanglement is just a quantum phenomenon that can be used to create two correlated beams of particles. And if those particles are photons, well, that's electromagnetic radiation. A normal radar sends out a pulse of electromagnetic radiation, which will bounce off a target. The echo will be received by the radar and it will be used to detect the target. Easy and well established. A quantum radar works on a different principle. A quantum radar produces two beams of entangled photons. One, which is called the idler, is stored locally. The other is emitted as electromagnetic radiation. How this is done, for our purpose, is just a black box. In this way, it is possible, at least in theory, to identify the reflected photons among all the other photons received. That is, the idler and the transmitted signal are correlated, and this correlation persists with the radar return. This means that even a minuscule return is detectable, potentially even a single photon. Obviously, in theory, always in theory, because in theory there is no difference between theory and practice, but in practice there is.
We have a problem, sir.
Now what?
We don't have B-roll, sir.
Yes. Obviously, there are no pictures. Operational radars don't exist yet, as far as we know. So for this video, I guess you are stuck with my drawings and some generic B-roll. Now let's have a look at the idea in some more detail. Every electronic circuit has noise. A radar that is just receiving passively will receive plenty of signals, but also noise caused by thermal emissions or by the sun, by the rest of the universe and so on. Plus, it will generate noise itself. If anything, thermal noise. The power of the noise generated is one of the radar performance parameters. The lower, the better. This is used in the signal-to-noise ratio in decibels, which is defined by the formula on screen, that is 10 times the logarithm in base 10 of the ratio between the signal power and the noise power. A signal to be detected needs to be strong enough to go beyond the set signal-to-noise ratio. This is how a conventional radar decides that there is a detection, that is, there is a signal above a specific power threshold, which is defined, among other things, by the level of noise in the receiver. If the signal is not strong enough, it is sunk inside the noise. Well, to tell the truth, there are techniques to dig deep into the noise, and modern radars have digital signal processing algorithms that do exactly this, but still the noise remains the obstacle to the radar ability of detecting weak signals. Quantum radar, though, do a different thing. Quantum radars analyze the correlation between what has been received and the local beam, and they can recognize their own emissions and tell them from the rest of the received signals. They can tell their own emissions from the noise or any other emission. This allows in principle to identify a signal way lower than the noise threshold. They can detect even extremely faint returns that normally would be completely drowned in noise. For example, like those caused by stealth aircraft. And you also understand that such a radar is basically immune to jamming because it will discard everything you throw at it as not being the return of one of its impulses. At least, this is the theory because nobody has yet deployed a serially produced quantum radar in operational units yet. Studies on the quantum radar can be traced back to the early 2000s in the United States. In reality, it was necessary to develop a sound theoretical background before experimentation started in the late 2000s. A full story of the development would take us way too far, but several experiments proved the concept, both in the US and in Europe. These experiments, though, were desktop experiments in a lab involving complex setups, and they verified the detection at ranges of few meters. Companies like Lockheed Martin or Biosystems established units to develop the technology that should still exist today. DARPA funded several research efforts, but in 2020 they came to the conclusion that it is not yet a practical near-term solution for long-range detection. Today there is still research going on the West, but it is not considered a priority. However, someone else is of a different mind, and they weren't idle. Chinese started working on the quantum radar at academic level since 2008. In the same years, there was a large multi-billion Chinese investment on quantum technology, and quantum radars were one of the areas involved. Like many others, I didn't realize at the time how quick and productive the Chinese are when it comes to new technologies, so I overlooked the entire issue. And in fact, in 2016, CETC, a large Chinese electronics conglomerate, announced the development of a quantum radar prototype. It is not 100% clear whether this was a prototype suitable for an operational deployment or just a research platform. I tend to believe that it was the latter, that it was technology demonstrator, but I can't be sure. Anyway, Chinese research pushed ahead when everybody else was slowing down, and a few years later the Chinese announced a 100 kilometers detection. In the academic journals, concepts started to appear on how to operationalize quantum radars. One of the proposals, for example, envisaged a network of high-altitude balloons or drones equipped with quantum radars covering the approaches to mainland China. The detection range is indeed a big deal. The main reason because in the West it is not considered a practical solution is exactly the short range. The emitted beam traveling in the atmosphere is subject to all kinds of disturbances, and this may cause decoherence, that is, the correlation with the idler is being progressively lost. Western studies have shown that this happens when the beam has traveled just a few kilometers at best. Furthermore, the farther is the target, the longer is the time between the beam emission and detection. The photons travel at the speed of light, which is extremely fast but not infinite. Traveling 100 kilometers and back takes about 70 microseconds. The farther the target, the longer the time, the longer the idler must be stored. The higher is the risk of the idler losing coherence. These are the limitations why the DARPA slowed down the research, but the Chinese obviously beg to differ. After that 1 kilometer's announcement, rumors of operational deployments surfaced in the Chinese social media, but I'm frankly skeptic on this point. And this takes us to the current events, when the Chinese in October 2025 announced the initial serial production of components. Mind, not entire radars, just components, just single photons detectors that are required to build quantum radars. These components, in fact, may also have other applications even in the civilian sector, but nonetheless this is a hint that operational systems are coming, or at least they are planned. In the West the doubts persist, but knowing the Chinese, I wouldn't be surprised if they pull this off. It is a fascinating development, and we will see what the future brings.
大家好，我是主播周玉琴。很多的朋友告诉我们，太阳星全效克菲尔益生菌帮助了睡眠品质。有季节敏感、代谢困扰、关心异常细胞风险的好朋友呢，可以选择原版的太阳星全效克菲尔益生菌。它添加有超级食物羽衣甘蓝，健康再加分。而有睡眠困扰的朋友们，赶快选择蓝色包装这一款晚安加强版，绝对是更有感。每日克菲尔，时刻美好 ，Good Feel Good， 请上快点购为健康下单，而且要记得输入推荐代码，有额外的折扣优惠。太阳星全效克菲尔益生菌基础版、晚安加强版，新包装改版，内容不变，抽取更方便。要吃就吃最好的。